Listen and live. Listen and live. Hope FM.
I'm delighted to be on Hope FM this
Karibu
morning.
sana, it's a pleasure.
And thank you for having me. And yes, congratulations to the C.A.S. who are being sworn in today, as I wrote. I mean, many people, well, what happens is that my ministry used to be called the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade, and Enterprise Development. Enterprise development is what has now been made a full-fledged ministry called the Ministry of Cooperatives and MSMEs, which means, therefore, that in my original Ministry of Trade and Industry, we had investment as a small department. Now it is a state department. But now enterprise development has gone to make the Ministry of Cooperatives and MSMEs. And therefore, the Ministry of the New Trade, Investment and Industry, I'll be handing over to the three C.A.S. that is Governor Kidero, Madam Mambruki, and I think Honorable Kemosi. Then, in the newly formed Ministry of Cooperative and MSMEs, which was a state department shared between us and the Ministry of Agriculture, I'll be handing over to Bishop Margaret Wanjiru as well as Alex Mugo. But now for the last year in government, because the minister in charge, the cabinet secretary and C.A.S. for the Ministry of East African Community and Regional Development were not in office. They went to go and run for office as governors. So the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, appointed my cabinet secretary, Madam Betty Maina, to also be the acting cabinet secretary for the Ministry of ESC. And by dint of that appointment, I was deputizing her in that role as well. That's how come now I'm going to be handing over to 7 C.A.S.
7.
That's why they called me Supercast.
We agree and we agree.
and maybe just to explain just a little bit what the role of a C.A.S. is.
So the Chief Administrative Secretary role, this is one of the issues that has been most hotly contested. Guys are saying it's waste and pilferage of government resources. Now, I do not believe, because we were 29 of us, and I think we served well in the previous regime. I think 50 was a bit stretched. But is there use for the office of the C.A.S.? Definitely. The Cabinet Secretary is in charge of leading policy making and policy implementation at the ministry. The principal secretary is in charge of leading the technical bit at the ministry. It means if you end up with a principal secretary who doesn't understand the essence of that ministry or state department, then it is in futility. However, the cabinet secretaries find themselves often too stretched. And when they are stretched, they obviously need a helping hand. Now, do they need 3? I do not think so. I think that if you had 1 or 2, they would suffice, depending on how wide the mandate of the ministry is. And so, every time when my friends asked, okay, sasa C.A.S. wanafanya nini, wanaharibu pesa, I reminded them, we do not have an issue with the assistant chiefs, but we have an issue with the assistant ministers. We do not have an issue with the deputy president, but we have an issue with the assistant ministers. We have no issue because the equivalent of PS, C.A.S. and C.S. in the case of the executive, the cabinet secretary is more or less the president. The C.A.S. is the deputy president. The PS is the head of public service. When you go to the counties, the equivalent is governor, deputy governor, and then you come down to county secretary. Now, I think we are also just Kenyans also sometimes just love venting it all out. I think, and this is not to validate it because I was in it, there is a need for the role, but it is needless to appoint twice as many as there were before handling those dockets.
And also I think the other issue that because I'm also a Kenyan, that we are having with the C.A.S, not the C.A.S as per the positions, is the people who are being appointed to these positions.
The quality of humans. Now, listen, one of my most cherished leaders globally, who was most impactful, is Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew was the president of Singapore. He was the founding father of Singapore. And Lee Kuan Yew, in making Singapore what it is today, the world's wealthiest country after Luxembourg, Lee Kuan Yew did only one thing. He ensured that for every appointment there was merit. That meritocracy and governance were the footstools of his appointments. It wasn't about who clapped the loudest for the people who supported him or who did not. It was about, is George competent to be in that office? Yes or no? And whether you loved him or not, because I have seen people now chiding the process that led to the appointment of the current C.A.S. More than 5,000 people applied. They were shortlisted. And you ended up with at least 80% of who are people who lost elections. Now, the Public Service Commission has a spotlight on itself. Previously, when we were appointed, there was a lacuna in law because they said that we should have gone through an interview. And that interview should have yielded, you know, competence and led to the best people who then become a nexus between politics and policy. However, what kept us in office was the ruling then told President Kenyatta to maintain status quo until COVID was over. That's how we stayed in office. Now, you would then believe, I would imagine, that the new regime would easily have said, you know, let's now follow the law as is because we have a chance to right the wrong. I am a firm believer that if you have people with the right credentials who have proven capability and who you use merit as the basis of appointment, you will end up with impactful leadership. I have seen it, I have been it, and I know it.
And we can attest.
We can. That's why we invited you this morning. And thank you for shedding light on that issue of C.A.S's and everything that goes.
It's been a very hot potato.
Yes, it has.
And just going back to our conversation now, we had a conversation that led to us having you here, Sir and Honorable Osiany. It's the fact that we were talking about the China Square. And then how there has been a whole conversation around it. But then we also realize we probably don't know the rules and the regulations and probably policies that allow for them to come and us to go there. Like, can I go have a Kenya Square in China right now? And all that. So we just wanted to understand the trade relations we have as nations and maybe why sometimes we have certain products that we feel Kenyans can still produce, but then we still have them coming from other countries. Like right now, I think we're taking eggs from Uganda and stuff like that. Like, what are some of the leeways we have and some of the opportunities we can also leverage on as Kenyans?
Well, I remember that the China issue was a very complex issue. So what is China Square? China Square is a place where the Chinese have come, opened a massive go down where people can buy things en masse, wholesale, or in some cases even retail. They are hugely discounted. Means they're far cheaper. Why are they cheaper? Because they are the producers. So the only cost they incur is the cost of transportation. There are no in-betweens. And so when you remove the middlemen, you have saved cost. Now, the Kenyan trader then thinks, Hapa, we are being ripped off. These guys have taken our business. Now, what they forget, every time it's called protectionism. Protectionism is when countries decide that we want to consume our own and we don't want other people to interfere by flooding our market and upstaging us. However, what we forget, the moment we spiral down to that protectionism, so long as we are part of some of the global treaties and agreements, I mean, you sign on to the United Nations, for example, it comes with a whole set of laws up to and including liberalized trade. Liberalized trade means, as a Kenyan, I am able to go into Tanzania and open a branch of my Crestwood Marketing and Communications and set up shop there, all I need is a work permit in countries that are not friendly or countries with which we do not have pre-agreement on issuing work permit or lack thereof. When we spiral into protectionism as we did, what we are doing is we are locking ourselves down to our own country. Do we have the wherewithal to even sustain ourselves? In some cases, yes. In most cases, no. We do not even produce enough for our own consumption now. One of the things we have told traders is to be able to ensure that they are competent. When you are competent, you're not worried about someone coming from the US with a product, because your product is competent. That is how we are admired as the people who birthed M-Pesa. China is copying M-Pesa from us. Competence. India is copying M-Pesa from us. Competence. America has taken the mobile money transfer knowledge from us. Competence. Now, if we are competent enough to be able to create the world's first mobile money transfer, why can we not be competent in our production? Now, there are many factors that affect production, which we will look at later. But then what the China issue reminded us is that protectionism is no longer an option. In a world where trade has hugely been liberalized, we have to up our game, get into production, which is why I was the biggest supporter of SMEs and value addition, get into production, and when we have sufficient production, where there is sufficient or oversupply of any goods or products, the cost comes down. If today you go to Laikipia, there is sufficient amounts of, let's say, waru. Because it is flooded there, the cost of buying it there will definitely be down. Demand and supply. So we have to ensure that we produce enough to boost the supply, which will meet the demand. Then the costs will come down. But so long as the supply is below the demand, because many people need it, few people have it, the prices will go up because they will take advantage of the fact many of you want it, there's very little of it. So it is a call to us to see what are these things that China Square has that Kenyans are flooding to go purchase. Could we do them locally? And sometimes, even where there is the will, I must admit, the biggest challenge we always had is how do we ensure that the cost of production is lowered so that then we can also do our own, meeting the same global standards.
Because that has been the problem, and everyone keeps highlighting the cost of production becomes the pain in the entire process, and to the point where even when I produce and I bring my product now to the market, it can't be able to compete with other products because mine, I will have to put it at a higher price because of the cost of production. But then again, as let me say, the administration, because this is now down to the policies and the laws governing the same in the country, how then can the government play a critical role to ensure that whatever that we are producing is of high quality, but also is very competitive when it comes to the pricing?
Now, the cost of production is subject to a myriad of things. I love that the Parliament is in conversation right now about why is the cost of power, which is a singular ingredient of production that cuts across every single production. Why is the cost of energy and power so high? And when you go to Parliament, you see that guy said, oh, we purchase from KenGen for so little, but then we have these other independent arrangements that sell to Kenya Power at so high. So today in the newspaper, I see that Parliament, the Parliamentary Committee on Energy has said, you know what, why don't you guys buy solely from KenGen? Because By so doing, you will have reduced the cost of energy, a very important ingredient or component in production. But also we have the issues around raw materials. Then you have all these other issues about competence, which then breeds quality. Do we do our things or our production in a manner that, one, it's sustainable? Is it affordable? And it's true. Your cost of breaking even as a producer in Kenya may not be the same as the cost of breaking even in China. So the guy in China, after he has done his production or her production and has ferried the whole of that, cache of goods here, he ends up still selling cheaper than you who was produced locally. Because you have to factor in energy is far much higher. The cost of labor in Kenya is very high. It's something that we don't like to talk about. But it's also an attempt at Kenyans trying to have a dignified sense of life. That's why we have a minimum wage. Now, in places like China, there's no conversation around minimum wage.
No.
But how many Kenyans are going to be willing to take 6,000 shillings a month for salary? And that's not affordable also because the cost of living.
Very high.
The rental rates. Hiyo haitalipa hata stima. So the government has decided, because we are signatories to the to the ILO, International Labour Organization, we are trying to ensure that we have dignified living. Now we have set the bottom, the minimum wage. You cannot pay any Kenyan below 13,220. That is the minimum wage, whether that's a house help or a gardener or a shampoo boy. It's an attempt to have dignified living. But now, if you are going to run a factory and you have that, bottom line in terms of the payment, minimum wage, it's going to impact on your cost of production. So where you need 100 people and you have to pay each one of them 13,000, your labor cost alone is 1.3 million. In China, they will not have that. So they will have 100 people working at 6,000 shillings, and that's 600,000. Already they have saved the 600,000 that they will use to transport. You haven't even transported yours from the factory in Oyolo to Kisumu. So those are the dynamics around it. Now, what the ministry did in our time was to ensure that we had a holistic approach to production. President Kenyatta in my regime, when we were in government, said there'd be 15% drop or discount in the cost of energy for the manufacturing sector, especially the SMEs. Problem is, how do you trace down the SMEs to be able to extend them that cost? Two, how are you able to segregate? What happens with that segregation? Now, that is why we need innovation. And our innovation trails the likes of China. But I am an Afro-optimist. I am a Kenyan optimist. I'm a believer in doing it right. If we do it right and we get competence. Competence. People whose hearts are given to service, people who are true patriots, then it's doable. But if you still want to give guys who will cut corners, want to cut deals, want to make money, want to do this, there's going to be a challenge.
Because the challenge, Honorable Osiany, is that we keep saying that Kenya is a hub, not just the East African hub, Eastern Africa, the entire African continent. We keep saying we are a hub, but are we really working hard to nurture and also exploit the opportunities and the opportunities that we have as a nation? Are we really doing enough to exploit the same?
No, I think there has been a journey of growth for Kenya. Truly. Even globally, in the Global Ease of Doing Business Index, Kenya was number 138. It moved up the ranks. Now it's 58 from the last Ease of Doing Business Global Index that was done in 2020. It was interfered with by COVID, and they haven't done another yet. In Africa, we are only the third in ease of doing business. So doing business in Kenya has greatly improved. It may not look like it for Kenyans when they go through their problems, but what that shows is it is going to be 5 times harder to do business in Ghana than it is to do business in Kenya. Okay? So we only trail Mauritius and Rwanda, where